From New York, it's That Kevin Show.
See, I knew it.
Come on, Kev. What's a few classified documents between friends?
I told you all the time. I knew it. I knew he had some too.
Here he is, That Kevin McCullough.
All right, my next guest has quite a story, not just in terms of who she is and where she came from, but also what she thinks about the country and what we need to be doing. She works in PR. She's worked in the White House, and we're very honored to have her with us tonight at That Kevin Show. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Roma Daravi.
It's great to be with you, Kevin.
Hey, Roma, how are you?
So fun to be here tonight.
Named after a tomato, huh? Is that...
Tomato, Italy. Technically, it's my great-grandmother's name, but we can go with tomato. That's what I tell my Uber drivers.
You have the most intriguing lineage. Tell my audience all of the influences that came down through the ages to make Roma.
Absolutely. Well, like I mentioned, my name is my great-grandmother's name from Yugoslavia, Montenegro. And that's my mother's side, Egyptian and Yugoslavian. Her father came over from Egypt, and my father is Persian Jew, and he moved to America from Iran for the American dream, has had success, lives in beautiful Southern California, and I am definitely a Cali girl at heart. But it really does make me who I am, like you said, and it's a small business household, Christian values, Jewish culture, and it really is the epitome of what America is at the end of the day, because we are a Judeo-Christian nation, and we believe in the American dream, and that's why so many people are just dying to come here.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's start with your dad in Iran it's my understanding he came before the overthrow of the Shah, but we tend to think in America right now of Iran as being a very kind of backwards, very overly controlling dictatorial state with the mullahs, etc. There was a day when Iran was the opposite of that. What did your dad tell you about the Iran that he grew up in?
Sure. Iran, the stories that my father painted when he was just a young child and a teenager was somewhat of a mix between Miami and New York City. The beaches are painted in gold. The nightclubs are lively. The fashion was extraordinary. The photos that I have of my aunt and my other relatives that grew up there as well in their early 20s, going out and going dancing, it's just a totally different world from what it is today, which is why it really is so important as a nation in America that we focus on our values and that we fight for our values, because it can happen in the blink of an eye. You know, the change in government really does have an impact on your freedoms as a nation. And Americans, I believe, are starting to really take that for granted. You know, what's happening in Iran right now has been unfortunately happening for many, many years, decades at this point. It's comforting to see that there is some media attention on the protests that are occurring, the women in Iran standing up for their freedom, but it really is not something that's new. So I think that's really important to mention as well. This has been happening for decades. And, you know, as Americans, we should absolutely stand up and say that this is something that the country should have our support with vocally. With our voices, we should say that we stand with the women of Iran for their freedom, but it absolutely, make no mistake, is a terrorist regime. The country is dictators. They do not care about their people. They do not care about anything except destroying the rest of the world and taking control for themselves.
It's interesting that you mention all of that, because you worked in the Trump White House. And before you, of course, the Obama White House had control of it. And I remember when that woman was shot in Tehran for wearing blue jeans and a T-shirt in public, and the whole world condemned the killing of that young woman. And it happened right on it happened on live television. A lot of us saw it happen in real time because it was during one of the major protests. And it took President Obama nearly 10 days before he could come out and condemn that. And I just remember the difference in he and your boss, Mr. Trump, in terms of how they dealt with these real monsters that are in control over there. When your dad sees what's happening there now, does he ever talk about Does it ever strike him as anything significant?
Unfortunately, it's really not shocking to see what's happening in Iran for a Persian Jewish family. That's why everybody has left and is living out their American dream in beautiful California and New York, where you are as well. But it does matter who the president is, and it does matter what they say on the world stage. Policy also matters. Barack Obama was the president who, put forward billions of dollars in, the hands of Iran in the form of a so-called agreement that really was nothing other than a handout. So unfortunately, we are living in a time right now where we don't have a president with strength like President Trump. We don't have a president that is standing up to our foreign adversaries. And so we do have to really make sure that at the grassroots level in our local communities, we're starting from the ground up. We're starting at the kitchen table. We're starting in our own homes with our own children and making sure they understand how good and how bad things could really be, because it does happen in the blink of an eye, like I said.
That's so well said. Roma Davari is my guest, and very excited to have her with us tonight. Roma, let me ask you about the kind of layout of things at present. Obviously, 2020 was a very discouraging night for people that worked in the White House, such as yourself. But I have to think that for people like your mom and dad, who had come here, who have achieved the American dream, worked very hard, became entrepreneurs, and allowed you and your brother to have an opportunity that was kind of beyond the pale of anything they probably ever dreamed of. What were those years like for them when you were at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well, it was just an absolute honor and privilege to serve President Trump. I worked for him alongside my brother in Trump Tower back in 2016, moved down to DC, worked for him again in the White House, in his communications office, and he really did accomplish so much during just his first term, those 4 years. One thing that I do find really exciting and kind of a funny story I'll share is that David Bossie, who was on the campaign in 2016 as a deputy campaign manager, and Corey Lewandowski at the time, who was campaign manager as well, wrote a book together, and they signed it back in, I want to say it was winter of 2018, to my father. And they said, "Dear Homa, we moved to the embassy. Merry Christmas." And it was a really, kind of nice moment for them to say, look, this is funny and this is cool that we did this, but this is a momentous, huge occasion.
Yeah.
And the fact that that is something that we could just write in a book and look back on and say, wow, we made a real change for the people in Jerusalem. We're making changes all over the world. And so that's why it's so important what happens this next presidential cycle. That's why President Trump is running again. There's so many lies that are told about him. The fact that people say he's anti-Semitic is absolutely mind-blowing. There's never been a president that supports Israel, that supports American Jews all over the world the way that President Trump does.
No, that's well said. And we're coming right back. I want to get your thoughts on the contemporary administration and some things they've been saying lately. She's Roma Davari. You can find her on Instagram, and we'll tell you more about how you can even hire her firm if you're in need of some good PR when we continue. Stay here.
Ready or not, we'll be right back.